Fed will not pivot and not create more liquidity until there's at least a 30 or 40% drawdown in the markets, in my opinion. They'll wait for real pain before they quote unquote revert back to stimulus. So in my opinion, it's not a time to chase these markets now. Wait till there's at least a 30% reversion. Then the Fed will come in. And like March of 2020, you'll get the buying opportunity of a lifetime.
Welcome to Wealthion. I'm Wealthion founder Adam Taggart. Thanks for joining us for part 2 of our interview with monetary expert Matt Piepenburg. If you haven't yet watched part 1 of this discussion with Matt, in which he warns that the vast and fast multiplying amount of global debt will inevitably cause the destruction of the purchasing power of the world's major currencies, head over to our channel at youtube.com/Wealthion and watch it there first. It sets the context for the investment themes we discuss in this video. Okay, let's get started watching part 2 of our interview with Matt Piepenburg. Right. What assets are you looking at right now, given what you see coming? And correct me if I'm wrong, but having read your article, it does seem like you think that there are short-term disinflationary and deflationary risks heading probably as we get to, the lag effect causing some things to crack and a market correction as a result of that and whatnot. So there may very well be, a lot of downward price destruction before we get this big rescue that then shoots things to the moon.
Oh yeah, no, it's an important question. And again, a lot of criticisms, there's so many different types of investors that are watching this. I can't give one answer because it's what I would tell my daughter, what I would tell my father are different advice. Right. What I would tell, some people who are active traders don't even want my advice because they look at things differently. At 30,000 feet, the first thing I'd have to distinguish before I give any specific advice is what type of investor are you? Are you a preservation-focused investor or a growth-focused or somewhere in the middle? Many criticisms of folks like me, because I'll be blunt, I am not looking for growth anymore. You've heard the joke, how do you make a small fortune? You inherit a large fortune. Right. To me, the key to remaining wealthy is not to lose money. I'm at that point by luck or crook that I'm not interested in trying to double my money every year in the markets. I had that mentality in my 20s and 30s and I got lucky. And now I just want to preserve. So I have a different bias. I'm the boring gold, precious metals guy, like many of our clients, whose main focus right now is just preserving. I understand the criticism that, hey, Matt, that's great, but there's many of us who need to grow and beat inflation. So how do I position myself? If you're not already a trader, because I know people that, like I said, who just do one thing. If they go long and short Tesla, that's their career. They can make a lot of money by following exit and entry signals, Bollinger Bands, Keltner Bands, DMARC indicators, sector rotation scales. It's very complex. You can't give that kind of advice over the air because it requires years of experience. Right. So for many of your viewers, I would understand they're relying then on their advisors. And my point is, so with your advisor, the first thing I would say, again, I'll repeat it over and over, get the heck out of a risk parity portfolio of diversified stocks and diversified bonds because they're correlated. I would also check with your advisor, what is the benchmark? Is the benchmark the S&P for your portfolio or an absolute return of, say, 8 to 10% to beat inflation? Because the answer your advisor gives tells you the type of mentality he or she has. Because just benchmarking the S&P is too easy. That means when the S&P is down 30 and you're only down 20, that's victory. So again, look at how your advisor, if you're not actively trading yourself, how does your advisor look at risk? What really is the hedge? My opinion, my advisor, if I were going to advisor right now, I'd want one who knows how to go long and short and hedge. That's very generic advice. But I'd also want an advisor right now who sees a topping market and is more interested right now in waiting for mean reversion, because I do see an uh-oh moment. Don't know when, could be 9 months from now or 9 weeks from now, but I would want a portfolio that doesn't have to time that is already hedged enough right now, mostly in cash equivalents. Like Ray Dalio and others, I think even, Jeremy Grantham, a GMO, they're heavily in cash equivalents and short-term or short-duration treasuries because they're not looking to top out right now or to chase a top. They understand the old adage, buy low and sell high, that almost no one does. But I don't see a lot of alpha right now in just going long a few sectors. I think, as I've said before, if you want to buy low and sell high, you've got to have the patience like a Jim, I would actually say a Rick Rule or a Ross Beatty. These guys have long-term horizons.
Hmm.
There is clearly, as Ronnie Sturfula has shown, a cycle, an inverse relation between commodities and equities in the S&P. Right now, commodities are cheap. It's value, but they can be very volatile and stomach churning for short duration thinkers, short-term investors. If you're a longer term thinker and you're looking and you have the time and the patience to wait it out, you could go into an allocation to commodities, 10, 15% commodities, a much larger allocation to short duration treasuries to try and at least keep up with inflation. My advice is to wait for a mean reversion and buy low in any sector in the equity markets. I would stay away, as Luke Groman says, from long duration treasuries and long duration sovereigns. They're just not giving you return free risk anymore. They're giving, I mean, risk free return. They're giving you return free risk. So again, it's commodities, it's cash equivalents, it's patience, and it's waiting for mean reversion. You could argue that there'll never be a mean reversion in the markets because the Fed will just print money to keep markets always up and above the nose level of the water level. But the Fed will not pivot and not create more liquidity until there's at least a 30 or 40% drawdown in the markets, in my opinion. They'll wait for real pain before they quote unquote revert back to stimulus. So, in my opinion, it's not a time to chase these markets now. Wait till there's at least a 30% reversion. Then the Fed will come in. And like March of 2020, you'll get the buying opportunity of a lifetime. So if you're 70 or 80 years old, though, and you can't wait for a mean reversion and you can't sit in cash forever, it doesn't mean you should be chasing tops. So it's very complex. And again, it goes to, are you looking for growth? Are you trying to preserve? What's your age level? What's your tolerance? It sounds like I'm trying to avoid the question, but really for me, I like to buy low and sell high. I'd rather get a commodity, more commodity focused portfolio, not just gold, not just silver. I'm talking commodities, hard assets, while they're cheap, and have the patience to wait many years. My daughter, who's 28, can do that. Some of your viewers don't have the patience, or maybe they do. I don't want to presume. I think to be chasing tops when you're not actively trading means you then have to ask your advisor, well, what are you doing then to protect against risk and capture some alpha? It's very hard to capture alpha in these markets unless you know how to go long and short. It's that simple. You need active management right now. If you're relying on a third-party advisor, you need active management. And as we said last time, and I'll pound my fist again and again, get managers whose first protocol is managing risk, not promising projections. Because this is not a market, in my opinion, that offers a lot of alpha right now on the long side. There's just too much downside risk. And I have been bearish for years, but I've always found opportunities in the markets long and short if you know what you're doing. And there were moments like in March of 2020 where I was as bullish as you could be when I saw the Fed starting to go into unlimited QE. And I'm as cynical about the Fed. But when you get a signal like that, it's full speed ahead, full gas down long equities. Right now is not the time to be doing that. Wait until there's that dip that requires Fed pivoting or Fed liquidity, whatever they want to call it. That's your opportunity. Your managers should be holding in cash until that opportunity comes, in my opinion. I think to be chasing tops and buying the narrative that these are resilient markets, that labor is strong, that a soft landing is here, let's go long and hard the S&P, that's crazy. As we've just talked about for the last hour, it is not a soft landing. The labor market is not resilient. And we have a debt-based system that is going to need more stimulus from the Fed. And that stimulus will come only after the markets cry uncle and start puking. That doesn't mean you short the S&P and time that. Wait for it to start puking. Buy that dip when the Fed is stimulating the recovery. And that's my plan. So in the meantime, I stay out of it. I'm mostly in cash equivalents, got some commodity exposure, and I preserve the wealth I have through gold, not because gold rips. It's only because currencies get weaker. And even gold goes down when markets go down. They're very commiserate in the first 6 to 8 weeks. That's nothing new. But I am less sexy giving investment advice now because my primary goal is preserving what I have, not trying to grow it. It doesn't mean I don't respect people who are trying to grow their wealth right now. These are very hard markets to do that in when they're topping and they're not getting the support of the Fed yet, but they will. But that won't come until after markets take a nosedive first.
All
Does that
right.
make sense to you, Adam?
No, absolutely. Very well said. And on every one of these videos, I make I have a little diatribe near the end where I recommend that most people watching work under the guidance of a good professional financial advisor. in general, because most people don't have the expertise that you were, talking about there to play the long and short and do all the active management. And they have real lives, right? They've got a bunch of other demands on their attention.
Exactly.
But you got to find a good financial advisor who understands all the macro issues that you've been talking about here. And that actually really narrows the field a lot. So Matt, at the end of this video, we're going to have one of our financial advisors come on. They're going to do a little bit of reaction to what you said, and then they're going to talk about what the markets have done over the past week. These are the guys, the ones from New Harbor, who are very focused on capital preservation, hedging. They're currently positioned very much like the way that you just mentioned. So I did not know what your answer was going to be when I asked you that question. I'm just going to let you know you're probably going to get a really nice fruit basket in the mail from the guys at New Harbor. You couldn't have teed up any better. But I agree with everything that you said there from a principle standpoint. Well, look, we've gone the hour. If you've got a minute or two left in you, I just want to get to the question I sort of mentioned once or twice earlier, which is, by the way, it's always a total pleasure talking to you, Matt. Thank you for another great discussion and so much time. But about the social side of this, right? So if we play out this arc, right, of continuously, every time we get into crisis that's caused by the ever mounting debt that we have, right? I mean, we have our current fiat monetary system borrows money into existence. So the longer the current system runs, just mathematically, the more debt is going to be brought into existence, right? At some point, that has a terminus, right, where it just doesn't work for enough people, right? And you sort of gave nod to this earlier, which is, Powell has this stealth, secret real inflation plan that he's going to plan on doing, right? Where officially, if you look at it, it looks like he's beating inflation, but in the real world, right, using the old Volcker math, it's actually negative real rates, and that's helping the Fed kind of inflate away the debt, right? That will work up until the point there's enough people who just get pushed out of the prosperity zone, and it just doesn't, they can't get by anymore, right? And it's sort of that, you can pee on my leg, don't pee on my leg and tell me that it's raining, right? Enough people say, look, I'm tired of the happy talk about how great you're saying things are. I literally can't feed my family this month, right? And I think that this is sort of, again, a reflection of Oliver Anthony's success is a reflection that a critical mass of people are getting to this stage, right? How much longer we have to go, I don't know. Could be years, could be decades, right? But at some point, you get to a point there where the majority of the populace just has no other option except to say, this just isn't working for me. We got to throw the bums out. And you have some sort of social pushback, some sort of social revolt. And it can be, we've seen the French Revolution. We saw what just happened 2 years ago in Sri Lanka, where basically the entire country showed up at the presidential palace and just dragged the guy out, right? Will it get that bad? Who knows? I don't know. I'm not trying to be inflammatory, but do you see a path where we avoid that kind of social unrest if on this current trajectory?
Obviously, there's a best case and a worst case, and I'll try my best to be an optimist. It's hard for me, the cynic I am, but I think optimistically, the way to let out some of the pressure was if we had a legitimate democratic system, and the Pollyannish answer is, let's elect better representatives who are more blunt, honest, and economically savvy than our predecessors. Let's bring in people that really do have profiles and courage and care more about their country than re-election, face austerity, face entitlement cuts, face budget cuts, face military cuts, have better foreign policy, get us out of avoidable proxy wars, which would have been a disaster for us in the world. Bring in better elected officials and get us out of this deep state that I was talking about that Mike Lufgren wrote so brilliantly about. These are not conspiracy theories anymore. Who really is running? Who are the ideologues and the neocons, left or right, who are making policy? If the DNC and the RNC can be reformed so that we can actually pick our official nominees rather than have, frankly, billionaires decide who they're going to prop and then we get to vote for. I think there are many Democrats who like to see someone other than Biden, by the way. I think there are plenty of people that might want to see Robert Kennedy Jr. as an example. I'm saying we need to reform the system, not claiming election for. I'm just saying, let us actually pick better leaders, because the propped up versions we're being handed is an insult to us. It's Dumb and Dumber, left and right. We get mediocrity or mediocrity when we have to have third party candidates who can't beat the system, who can't get the legacy media, who can't get the financing. We don't have a democracy. When you have four lobbyists for every elected member of House influencing the decisions of our quote unquote representatives, that is not democracy. So we'd have to have the optimistic case is we get real leaders. So we don't need pitchforks and Sri Lanka and revolutions and January 6s and broken frustration that just emits itself out. We need more. I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy, this Vivek is one of the guys. Robert Kennedy Jr. is one of the guys. These are smart guys. Whatever you think, they're smart. Ramaswamy he's a classic Yale Law School guy. I can see the way his mind works. He's smart. He's evidence-based. He can take both sides. He's got such confidence and such wisdom. It's another billionaire running for office, but I'll take it. It's smarter and better. Or Robert Kennedy Jr. on the other side. I guess I'm saying one way to solve this is better, really intelligent, economically savvy, blunt-speaking leadership. We haven't seen that in a long time. The negative side, and I've said this last time, and this is where I frankly lean to more pessimistically, because this is what history teaches me, and I've said it again, it's a syllogism. Every time in history where you have a debt crisis, whether it's a regime, an empire, or a democracy, it's always followed by a financial crisis. It then is followed by a currency crisis or an inflation crisis, which is always followed by social unrest. And that social unrest is always responded by extreme centralization from the left or the right. And that's what we're seeing right now with mandates, lockdown, censorship, CBDC. I see a trend, the silencing of dissent, the guilty until proven innocent, the smear campaigns against malinformation, the demonization of Tucker Carlson or Russell Brand or Jordan Peterson, left or right. What we're seeing is malinformation that Eric Weinstein talked about is such a threat to these broken, desperate ideologues in power that have destroyed our system through debt and through worthless, expensive wars and trillions spent on alternative energy that has not made us carbon neutral. These forces are preventing other voices, and we're seeing more centralization. That's the other real risk. When you have more centralization, that's another way of stopping pitchforks. I think a safer way to stop pitchforks is to let us elect better, more informed people. Let's actually hope that democracy and election still works. As Churchill said, democracy is a mess, but it's better than anything else.
Right.
I hope it still works. If we just get the same usual suspects in the next election, mediocre 1 versus mediocre 2, we're going to get the same, again, 2 stirrups, same saddle, riding us right over a cliff. I think we need more than the AOCs of the world, the George Santos of the world, come on, Mitch McConnell, bless his heart, but the guy literally stopped speaking for a minute and his mouth dropped. That's not leadership anymore. We don't need to galvanize power to the point where we're insulting each other with leadership that needs to be replaced. Left or right, I am agnostic. I want someone who's blunt, who's qualified, and most importantly, who is less interested in their reelection and more interested about rolling up their sleeves and doing the hard work of facing the financial realities this country faces. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of just platitudes and blah, 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 blah.
So however, whatever happens, best case scenario, worst case scenario, it's likely to be messy and it's likely to be painful. One thing that I think is needed, and I think will be needed, like I think it will emerge eventually. I just don't know where in the process, and it could be at the very end, who knows, but is this sort of I'll borrow it from the Native Americans, right? But sort of the seventh generations type thinking, right? Mm-hmm. Where right now we're always making sort of political decisions for what everybody needs right now, right? Oh, we've got this problem, so people are suffering today. Let's do X, right? Yeah. We need to shift to this mindset of, yes, we have current needs and issues as a populace, but we are trying to leave a legacy to our progeny. Right. Mm-hmm. And, what we've pursued for the past 40 years has basically been, let's just steal as much of our progeny's prosperity and pull it into today. Right. You're going to need to have a shift around that where we say, look, we're going to have to leave, a chunk of it for tomorrow. And we are going to have to sacrifice today for a better tomorrow. Yeah. I think that's what's going to have to emerge at some point here. And it might be after, the conflagration and the ashes, cool. But at some point, I think it's going to need to emerge. Do you share that opinion?
Yeah, it's another great quote by Eric Weinstein the other day. He said the problem is our baby boomers don't love their children. He meant that sarcastically. He says we're just putting bullet holes in all our life rafts. We're trying to live for ourselves. We're not thinking about the next generation. We're not that great generation of 44. And we're not that generation that's even able to suffer in the Rust Belt during the Depression, where we came together as communities or we came together as families. We're splintered and we're divided. And as a country, we can't even unify on many things, whether it's foreign policy or whether it's January 6th or whether vaccines are safe or effective. We're so divided. I don't think BLM is the same as Martin Luther King. I think there's things that have changed for the worse, and there are many great leaders, black, white, straight, not straight, who would agree. We've got to find common ground that we're not getting from our current crop of political leadership, and a generation that is thinking more about itself than the next generation, and also a generation that is debating more on emotion than on facts. That's what I like about Vivek, for example. He's evidence-based. Facts are stubborn things. You can have your own opinions, but not your own facts. I think we need to get down to facts, to compromise, to cooperation. Again, these all sound Pollyannish. I don't know if that's possible with this generation. There's so much anger, there's so much division, there's so much me first, from our musical lyrics to our political thinking to our entitlements. I don't know if that's possible. If the generation is willing to actually sacrifice now for the next generation, especially if it's not their immediate generation. If we're thinking what's best for our country, and if we had a notion of what that vision is, we have a chance. It's very hard to imagine right now, given the fragmentation, the fractured nature of our society, the wealth inequality, the genuine and understandable resentment among so many different groups in the society that feel marginalized or feel entitled or feel left out. It's a pell-mell of psychological, financial, political, and philosophical forces dividing this country, that we need the type of people that really can find a common denominator, a common spinal column in this country or in this system that we can all agree on. I don't know. That sounds so Pollyannish to me right now. We need truly heroic, blunt speaking leadership, and we need truly heroic and blunt speaking population willing to come together, like we've done many times in the past when we had a good fight to fight. Right
Right.
now, we don't even know where to look.
Well, I'll leave you with this bit of guarded optimism, which is talking to Neil Howe, the demographer, the foreturning around this. I sort of asked him, I said, look, I look back at all these other tumultuous times in history, and there were these leaders that emerged, right, who were great leaders. And they had this platform that everybody could rally around, right? You just can't be against everything. You actually have to be for something that's constructive, that
Right.
people realize is a good that they want to fight for, right?
Right.
And I said, like, I'm not seeing that many right now. Is it just that we have a really bad crop this year of leaders, or this time of leaders, or have things just not gotten so bad that they haven't emerged yet? And he said it's much more the latter. He said most of the leaders that come out during these periods are very reluctant. They weren't people that sort of sought the role. And
Right.
it's like the pressure of the earth that forces coal into becoming a diamond, right? Where it just, once the pressures get hard enough, the leaders do emerge. Now, the cost of getting the great leader is the pain that precedes it, right? So, things may need to get a lot worse before we get some better leaders. But Neil was actually surprisingly confident that, from what he's seen repeating back in history, is that they will come. It's just maybe going to be at a pretty high price.
I hope he's right. Look, there's a famous quote by Lenin, I didn't create the revolution, I just followed it. I just captured it. There goes the crowd, I'll follow. It can be great leaders or dangerous leaders. There can be demagogues, or there can be Gandhis or Kennedys.
Right. And sorry to interrupt, but just to let you respond, Peter Atwater, who I was interviewing at the same time around this, his big worry about social inequality is what could happen in terms of who we do elect to address it. Because he said, if you stand out in the cold rain long enough, you'll get in the car with anyone.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. And look at Franco, or look at Mussolini, look at Hitler, look at Lenin, look at Stalin. In other words, in moments of weakness and fissures and desperation, some real dangerous characters can come in, or you can get some great leaders. To your point, it's the ones who almost have no choice but to do it because they want to do it, because they have to. They don't want to. And again, I'm not trying to push RFK Jr., but God bless him. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the fame. He certainly isn't arrogant and vain. He actually, I truly, sincerely believes he's worried about this country. He comes from a father who was assassinated, an uncle who was assassinated. He has risks. He's already had threats on his own life. He can't even get airtime on the legacy media. I don't agree with everything he says, but one thing I know, what I strongly believe, is he's sincere. Whatever he says may be his truth, but I know he means it. He's not just filling air to fill air. He has a genuine conviction. That's refreshing. Uh, do others candidates have it lesser or more? I don't know. And I'm not sure, but I think someone like that, a version of that, is refreshing. I mean, even Cornell West is running. He's another extreme. He was my professor at Harvard, my favorite professor, my favorite man. I think he's. I don't agree with everything he says either. I'll say this about Cornell West: he believes it, and he's smart as a whip, and he has 100% passion. That kind of passion, whether it's Cornell West or Robert Kennedy Jr. or Vivek Ramaswamy, because I think Vivek is sharp as a tack. I mean, I've seen this kind of kid in classrooms before. He's dangerously smart. And I'd be excited to see any of those three would be better than any of the usual suspects we have right now. But again, do we get great leadership or do we get demagogues? That's the scary point. Do we get demagogues or do we get, Thomas Jeffersons and James Madisons and Thomas Paines and, John Adams's,
Well, let's pray for the latter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
let's pray for that. And no matter what happens, it's going to take a long time, and you will have many, many bites at this apple coming on this program to discuss. Matt, thanks for giving us so much time. So appreciate it. Great discussion as always. For folks that have really enjoyed the discussion, maybe this is the first video of you that they've seen and they're getting introduced to you. Where can they go to learn more about you and your work?
Our URL is goldswitzerland.com. We're Matterhorn Asset Management, and all of my articles and interviews are posted on that website, and it talks about our service. Yeah, we're really about wealth preservation. Our minimums are very high, but we talk about gold for all audiences, but we privately store physical gold and silver outside of the banking system in jurisdictions other than your home country, in the safest vault in the world, because we're about wealth preservation and currency risk. And that's why we have a very singular focus. But anything that I'm thinking about or writing about can be found there. And my partner and colleague, Egon von Greyers, who's an iconic figure in the precious metal space, his articles and interviews are there as well. So you can get a very good education on precious metals on that website as well.
All right. Well, folks, look, if you're interested in hearing more about Matt's thoughts, definitely go there. Matt doesn't give a ton of interviews. So Matt, I really appreciate you coming on this channel. And folks, if you'd like to see Matt come back on this channel more often, please do us a favor. Let us know in the comments section below. But I think I already know it's going to be strong enough, Matt, that you've got an open invitation to come here anytime that you've got an important message you want to get out.
I always enjoy it, Adam. It really is a genuine pleasure. It's a good informal conversation. It's great. Necessary.
All right. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on, buddy. Can't wait to have you back on again soon.
Okay. Take care.